look at our second week of our Strangers series, a series as we walk through 1 Peter. As we continue to look at this letter that Peter was writing to those early Christians, those of the new church of Christ, as they were sharing together that those who felt lost or misplaced, they felt like things weren't going according to what they thought they were supposed to be, to those who were, as we see previously, scattered, those who were exiled, those who were journeymen, those who were, they thought that they should only be in one place, and yet here they find themselves in this new location. They often describe as exiles, those who are living outside of their home. And we realize that because of the gift of Christ, we are now exiles. We're now strangers living in this land, that while we are called not to assimilate, we're not called to difference, but rather to dwell and to help prosper and to grow where we are. That where we are, may it prosper as well. And so what we identify here as the truth and the principle of all of this is that God is still God, no matter where we're at, no matter where we go, that God is still with us. And I think that's what we begin to realize in this next portion of this passage, as we realize that as we are strangers saved, that we have this new hope. Because last week we began to look at that question of what is our hope? Well, what is our hope? It's because we are saved, that we've experienced God's grace. Because of God's grace, we therefore have peace. And so because of that, he's using this time as he uses that pastoral tone to continue to encourage and to continue to motivate, that even though in the midst of the season that he is in, that he understands that they feel misplaced, he knows they feel lost, that they feel disconnected. In the same way, Peter is soon to be crucified himself, that he is going through the same thing, that he's like, no matter what, we don't turn back, but rather we keep living in the hope that we have eternal life, as being heirs, as we're here, we are called, as Christ has come to save us. And so what we live off today is that we have this hope. That we have this hope for our present, for our future, and from our past as well, as we notice this. So if you break down this next section of 1 Peter, starting in chapter 1, we're going to break it down to three little areas where we see in verse 3 through 5. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil or fade. The inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. Now, Peter reminds us that this new birth that we've received, it wasn't that we had earned it, it wasn't that we had accomplished something great, but rather it has come to us, as we see here, through the mercy of God. And so it's the new birth, that this new life through Christ, which brings our living hope. That our hope is without us until we receive this, and once we receive it, now because of that, because of Christ, we have this new living hope. A new hope that is through Christ because of him rising from the dead. And we're waiting for his return, that our hope is still alive. And that because of that, we're waiting for the day that we'd be reunited with Christ. We have this new hope that we're able to share together. That is this reuniting. The story throughout the Bible is the story of reuniting us, bringing heaven and earth back together, like it was in Genesis and will be concluded in Revelation. When the day is done, that we'd be reunited to being with God in his presence once again. But we realize that all of this was made possible by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But by dying on the cross and raising again, that he opened the door for the Spirit of God to dwell in us, not just to be that we would go to and we would praise and worship, not to that we would just be amongst us, but rather it's within us. And so because of that, Jesus, as we see in Romans 8, that he was this new temple, that this new place, and so therefore that we are a new temple, that we would be this representation of Christ, that when people see us and they feel the Spirit that lives within us, that they would be moved by the presence of God that comes around us. And so this is why we continue to focus on what is that hope. Because I think it's in the midst of turmoil that we have to keep that in our focus, to realize what our hope is. And so Peter, as he continues to write in this nature, as he's trying to uplift, as he shares with them, that rather that we see that Jesus is that new temple, and then that we are part of that because of the Spirit that lives inside of us, that is the starting point, the foundation that we needed to realize where Christ is going to build upon, to bring about this new hope, that we are the building blocks of this ultimate new temple, this new life with Christ. And so as Peter shares with that, he talks about this building process. He moves from rather than just his new hope idea, rather into what comes forth from that. That we have this hope of life, but our hope is the inheritance of what's to come someday. Well, we begin to live in it now, that we're able to have a portion of that, as we've seen as we talk about the victor, those who wear crowns, that they have some for the race now, but also some for that race at the end. And so we're able to experience part of that now with Christ, with His Spirit with us. But someday we'll receive in full as we share with Him. And so as he uses that analogy for us, that he changes that this mindset, that hope is in the inheritance, that someday we'll receive this in full. What he goes through here is to remind us of the things that we understand that it will not be. He says it will not be, it's not incorruptible, undefilable, unfading, but rather it's reserved for us. So rather it says, it won't perish, it won't break down, it won't spoil, it won't decay. We won't lose sight of this, but rather, he says, that he has it in possession, that Christ has it for us. Like it's waiting for us. And I think that's what's significant here, is that sometimes we think, well, it might not be there when I get there. I think that's the fear that many have, just about like retirement and Social Security. If we're being honest right now in our lives, you think about, well, maybe there won't be any money when I get there, when I'm ready to retire. Will I have enough? Well, here we realize that God has it, and it's more than enough. And He's holding on to it for us, that He has it control. But we have to realize in the nature in which we pursue Christ, that He has given this new opportunity, this inheritance that He's held fast for us. But we realize that it's come about because of the sacrifice that He made on the cross. That inheritance does not come without death. Just like in this world, in this life, the same comes through our inheritance with God. And so because of Jesus' death, Him assuming the position to take our guilt and our shame upon His shoulders, He opened the way and the avenue for us. And so because of that, He's using that opportunity for us to turn back from our own sinful ways and to receive Him. And therefore, He restores us back to Him. I think that's the process we have to realize. Sometimes we often think of the restoration process like an automobile. When you go in and you restore a car, so often what you do, you go back and you take old parts that might have been rusty or cracked, and you fix them and you polish them and you repaint them and you make it look good as new. But what God does, He takes us back, and it's like having a brand new car. Something brand new. Not that was once broken and reformed, but He says, I've made you new again. And that's the restoration that He does here for us. He takes away all the past and the brokenness. So often we hold on to it, but He brings us into this new life. And so because of that, He focuses His mindset on the way that we're able to share together. As He says, He shields us with His power. And that not only has He reserved our inheritance, but also He's shielding us. He's using that hope as a way to comfort us and to provide for us. And so because of that, it's available through our faith. Essentially what we see, the call here, is that we are responding to what He has done. That He's made this big response to our sin. Now, how are we going to respond to the way that He came and searched after us? That He's prepared a way, that He's accomplished this, but now it's upon us to receive this hope that's in our future. And so that's the challenge that we have. But so often we think, well, that's so far away, it won't be accomplished now. Okay, well, let's look at it right now then, and how do we accomplish it? And we see here, as he talks about it through 6 through 9, he talks about what's happening right now that we can hold on to. He says, all this you greatly rejoice. Though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief and all kinds of trials, these have come to so that the proven genesis of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor, when Jesus Christ revealed. Though you have not seen Him, you love Him. And even though you have not seen Him now, you believe in Him, and you are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. And what we realize is the time we're in and the uncertainty, when we're going through that trial. We don't understand what we're going through. He says, you're going through it right now. And because of that, we can relate because, we're going through it right now. And that's the urgency of this letter, that he says, when you're going through fire, when you're going through trials, that's when it's easy to just fall away. To say, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. And so it's his pastoral plea that's based, don't give up yet. This is what's going to help you get through right now. Remember this time, it was written in the time of Nero, who hated Christians, that he was willing to persecute. He was going to feed them to lions, and he was burning them at the stake, that he was there in this persecution mindset. And so just because of that, Peter began to develop this truth that we would understand. And what he relates back to is the strength of the salvation, the strength of the power of the resurrection, that what that means for us is it empowers us to withstand. Now, once again, Christ's coming the first time wasn't the way they expected. They wanted this warrior who was going to come in and defeat their enemies, but rather he came and took away their past. The things that was actually enchaining them. Not the persecution of this world, but their sin was what was enchaining them. And so here we find out that this is what he was doing. But they were hoping that they would no longer be worried. They'd no longer be tired. They'd no longer be let down. But instead, he does just the opposite. He provides hope in the midst of every circumstance and every season. And because of that hope, he brings forth the power that we have as we're able to rejoice in trials. And so he understands we're going to face these seasons. He understands we're going to go through them. That is why he uses that term, rejoice greatly, multiple times throughout the passage. That he wants us to rejoice in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the trial, in the midst of the opposition. Would you just continue to rejoice? Would you allow it to proclaim boldly in your life? Because if we lose that hope, if we lose that moment, we're going to realize that our life is meaningless outside of the resurrection, because it's not by our own earning, by our own device, but rather by the resurrection of Christ, we are given hope. And so in the middle of a storm, and when we're able to proclaim God, church, when we're able to cry out, we're able to worship, that is when it becomes real. And that's when that hope is able to carry us, but we're able to lean in upon him. And he says, that is why your faith is important. That's why it shows value. Because of those moments, because in the hardship and the trials, when it's able to show the value, the strength of which you've tested, the strength that you've worked it out, that you've been continue to spend time with God, that you open your word to spend time with God, it allows it to be tested, to be refined as it shares together. And as our faith is tested, we realize that that's when it becomes a reward. That's when it goes to the trial and the fire. That's when it comes to the glory, is honoring to God. See, it's not about for us, but rather will we give God glory even when we feel like everything feels broken or falling apart. Because we have to realize that God is not the cause, but what God does is he takes the trials that we're in, he takes the hardship, the opposition, he takes those bitter feelings. And when we say that, God, what else is going on? He says, I can take that and I can use that. And that's what he does. He's able to direct us through that. And he says, let me use this to make you better. Because what we realize here is, he understands for that first generation, for those who were able to witness Christ in person, to hear the stories, to see the healings, to see the miracle, they had it easy. They were testifying, but even though they saw, they still couldn't believe at times. And so he's seen, as Peter's writing to this next wave, the generation that hasn't seen, just like us, he's using that momentum to show us that we don't have to see in order to believe. That we're able to still rejoice even when we don't understand. He says there's more joy in that. There's more joy in those moments than just trusting God. That we allow the light to shine through us. Because that is our goal. Is that our salvation would stand. It wouldn't just be a season, but our salvation is the catalyst that moves and drives us forward as believers. As he reverts and he points direction to that future. He says that you get to experience it now, in part, that we would share into that, waiting for the fulfillment of it all. That someday we're going to experience it in full. That we're receiving the goal of our faith. And so as we see this, he continues on in verse 10. Concerning the salvation, the prophets who spoke of the grace that was to come to you, searching intently with the great care, trying to find out the time and the circumstance to which the Spirit of Christ in them was pointing, which he predicted the suffering in the Messiah and the glories that would follow. It was revealed to them that they would not be serving themselves, but you, when they spoke of the things that they had not been told you, but you have been preaching the gospel to you. By the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, even angels long to look into those things. That we realize in the midst of this, that as Christ was coming, before they were searching for fulfillment, they were longing to see, who was that? Are you the one? Are you the one? Are you the new Messiah? That they realized that there's going to be suffering. But we realize on the other side that would be glories to follow. Jesus dying on the cross. The glory was revealed on the other side of the resurrection. For us, on the other side of our acceptance of Christ is the glory. We receive that in our eternity with Christ. The Holy Spirit is present in our lives, showing us that. They long to experience this in the days of their lives now. They long to experience the Messiah now, as they wanted the Messiah to be this hero that was going to release them of their opposition and their pain and heartache. But when he came and he made a way to bring them hope that they could go through trials and God would still be with them. That they wouldn't feel abandoned, but rather they would have a hope that far outweighs their circumstances. And so Peter would use this time as he was leaning into them to urge them that no matter what, that we don't lose sight of these things, that we don't lose sight of our faith in Jesus. That was the basis of his message. He says, to all you strangers, to all that you were lost, all that you've been scattered, that this is not your home, that God will still use that, and to use where you're placed to continue to lead you closer to the prize. We see in Acts chapter 4, verse 12, salvation is found in no one else, for there's no other name under the heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. God's message is forever. And that's why it's called the living hope. See, we have so much things in our life that are temporary, that seem so urgent right now. Things that we have to get done this afternoon, or things that you're going to accomplish later or this week. But yet, we realize that God's message is forever true, that it stands firm. And we need that. We need that living hope. Because it answers the question of what is our hope in? And what are we putting our hope in? And we see that. We have this amazing picture of what life looks like. But here's the thing. On our own, our circumstances don't matter. I mean, that's hard to say, but what we're saying is that we can't accomplish this, that there's no feat that I can do that can earn God's favor. While he gives it freely to me, that I can't do anything to accomplish it. And so while we think about going through trial, we go through heartache, we go through pain, when Jesus cried out from the cross, what we realize, it's on the other side of the resurrection. And so what we realize is this, right now, the things that you're going through are very real. The loss of memories, of gatherings, of vacations and trips, maybe we have our schedules, our routines, people. We've lost people. The things that we're going through and we've lost are very real. Our circumstances are very real. Very significant. But what we realize is this. With the hope of Christ, with that living hope, those circumstances matter, but they won't matter forever. Because we have a hope beyond this place. Because this is not our world. It enables us to understand joy and sorrow. Because as we gather together, we're pointed towards Christ. And that's the thing that we want you to experience as we share together. Have you experienced that living hope? The living hope of God that lives inside of us, that gives us that guidance, that gives us the strength, that enables us to say, God, I cannot do this, that I'm giving you control. I'm leaning into your understanding. And if you haven't done, that's something that we take seriously, that we want to share with you. And it's hard to do it distantly and do it remotely as this. But I want to challenge you that if you would go to our website, if you'd go to FCC Florida, watch a little video on there on our homepage. You scroll down halfway, there it is. What is it like to know God? Watch that, and if you have more, we would love to have that talk with you about what it means to experience and to walk with Christ. That challenge that we have, because we were born into this by the receiving of Christ. And what we're going through seems significant, and it is a lot, and it's real. But it's not lasting. Will we find the joy in the middle of the storm as we seek to worship and understand that we have been born again, new life? Not saying you're trying to revive the old, but he gives us new life. That we've been scattered, spread out. That we are truly strangers that have been saved. And that is our hope. But the question is, what do we do with that hope? And that's the challenge. To go out, to live it out, to be a light in the world as we share together and point other people closer to Jesus as we share in the walk together.
Yes, I will lift you high.